But in the current digitized world, trivial information is accumulating every second, preserved in all its triteness, never fading, always accessible.
Rumors about petty issues, misinterpretations, slander.
All this junk data, preserved in an unfiltered state, growing at an alarming rate.
It will only slow down social progress, reduce the rate of evolution. Everyone withdraws into their own small gated community, afraid of a larger forum. They stay inside their little ponds, leaking whatever truth suits them into the growing cesspool of society at large.
The different cardinal truths neither clash nor mesh. No one is invalidated, but nobody is right.
Not even natural selection can take place here. The world is being engulfed in truth.
And this is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper.
Something is being decided for you right now. Not by a person, not by a committee, by a system. One that knows more about your habits, your fears, your desires than most of your closest friends do. And it made a decision probably in the last 24 hours about what you would see, what you would read, what you would feel strongly about, what you would share. You didn't consent to that decision. You weren't asked. The option to opt out is technically available and functionally meaningless. Here's the question I keep coming back to. Is that censorship or is that curation? And who gets to decide which word we use?
We're not what you'd call human. We are the very discipline and morality that Americans invoke so often.
That's from a piece of writing that came out in 2001. 25 years ago, before social media, before the smartphone, before the algorithm became the invisible hand shaping what reality looks like for 3 billion people. The people who wrote it were trying to tell us something. Most of us weren't listening. I'm going to spend the next half hour making sure you hear it. Let's start with the argument that aged the most accurately. The one that reads today not like prophecy, but like a forensic report written after the fact.
But in the current digitized world, trivial information is accumulating every second, preserved in all its triteness, never fading, always accessible.
Rumors about petty issues, misinterpretations, slander.
All this junk data, preserved in an unfiltered state, growing at an alarming rate.
Never fading, always accessible. Before the internet, information had a natural lifespan. A rumor spread through a town and then died when enough people forgot it, or when the people carried it died themselves. A bad idea in a newspaper became a fish and chips wrapping by Friday. Slander had to be actively respread or it would fade. The architecture of pre-digital communication had a built-in immune system. Noise decayed. The internet abolished decay. Every bad take you've ever had lives somewhere. Every piece of misinformation that went viral in 2014 is still indexed and searchable. Every conspiracy theory that flourished and was debunked, the debunking didn't delete the theory. They both exist side by side with equal accessibility. Type something into search engine and you get the peer-reviewed study next to the guy on YouTube who says it's a hoax. The platform doesn't know the difference. In terms of digital infrastructure, they're the same object. The technical term for this is information symmetry. The idea that all data, regardless of quality, reliability, or truth value, is stored and surfaced using the same mechanisms. The filing system doesn't care what's in the file. And there's a compounding problem on top of that, which is that attention, human attention, is not symmetrical. We are not wired to engage with calm, measured, accurate information the way we engage with outrage, novelty, or fear. Our nervous system evolved in an environment where those signals meant something urgent was happening. A snap of a twig, a change in the light, the smell of a smoke. The algorithm learned this about us very quickly because the algorithm is optimizing for engagement. And engagement follows attention, and attention follows threat response. So the system that determines what you see was from the earliest function days. Structurally incentivized to surface whatever made you feel something strong, regardless of whether that something was true. This is what the writing was pointing at when it said information accumulation with slow social progress reduced the rate of evolution. It's not a metaphor, it's a mechanism. A population that cannot agree on what's real cannot coordinate around solving real problems. Full stop. You can't build consensus on a foundation of irreconcilable competing realities. You can't pass legislation, allocate resources, or respond to collective threats as a society if half the society is operating from a completely different information environment. We've watched this play out in real time. The fracture in public health response during epidemics, the inability to agree on the basic factual basis of economic or environmental policy. The way every major story now arrives at pre-divided, not just in terms of what people think about it, but what people believe happened. And here's the part that should bother you most. Nobody did this on purpose. There was no villain in the room deciding to break epistemology. There were engineers trying to build things people would use. There were executives trying to maximize a metric. There was a system optimizing for what the system was told to optimize for. And the result, emergently, without anyone intending it, was a planet-scale mechanism for dissolving shared reality. The road to this particular hell was paved, as it usually is, with quarterly earnings targets.
But not all the information was inherited by later generations. A small percentage of the whole was selected and processed, then passed on. Not unlike genes, really.
That's what history is, Jack.
And they're right about that, too. History is curated. Every library is a selection. Every curriculum is a choice about what matters and what doesn't. Every culture decides implicitly or explicitly which stories are load-bearing and which can be left behind. We've always done this. The problem isn't curation. Curation is necessary. The problem is who curates and who watches them. Because the moment you identify a crisis of information and propose that a specific authority should resolve it, you've handed that authority something extraordinary. You've given them the power to define reality, and nothing concentrates power faster than the legitimate need to solve a real problem. That's not a hypothetical. That's the entire history of emergency powers. The second argument is more personal, and in some ways more dangerous, because it's aimed at the place you feel most certain about yourself.
That which you call self serves as nothing more than a mask to cover your own being.
In this era of ready-made truths, self is just something used to preserve those positive emotions that you occasionally feel.
Another possibility is that self is a concept you conveniently borrowed under the logic that would endow you with some sense of strength.
Now, is that true? This isn't a rhetorical question. I genuinely want you to sit with it for a moment. Think about your political beliefs. Where did they come from? Think about your aesthetic preferences. The music you think is good, the design you find beautiful, the kind of humor you respond to. Think about your moral intuitions. The things you feel obviously wrong to you, the things that feel obviously right. Think about your sense of identity, the narrative you carry about who you are and how you got there. How much of that did you construct? How much of it was handed to you by your parents, your geography, your economic class, the media you consumed, the friends you had between the ages of 12 and 18, and then felt like your own because you inhabited it long enough? This is not a new question. Philosophers have been wrestling with it for centuries, but the 20th century brought it into a sharper focus because the 20th century invented the modern tools for studying it empirically. What social psychology has consistently shown is that human beings are profoundly susceptible to context. The famous Milgram experiments in the 1960s demonstrated that ordinary people would administer what they believed were severe electric shocks to strangers, simply because an authority figure in a lab coat told them to continue. Not sadists, not weak-willed people, ordinary people, teachers, clerks, workers, behaving in ways that prior to the situation, they would have described as beyond their own moral capacity. Philip Zimbardo's work on situational behavior pointed in the same direction. We dramatically overestimate the role of character and dramatically underestimate the role of circumstance in determining what people do. We are far more shaped by our environments than we believe. And then there's the question of belief formation. Studies in cognitive psychology, particularly around motivated reasoning, show that we don't evaluate evidence neutrally and then arrive at conclusions. We arrive at conclusions first, usually shaped by social identity, and then evaluate evidence through that lens. We are not reasoners who occasionally have biases. We are bias-ridden animals who occasionally reason. So the claim that the self is partly constructed, that your beliefs, values, and identity are not purely self-authored, but assembled from materials you didn't choose, that claim has substantial empirical support. Here's where it gets dark. If the self is partly constructed by circumstance, then whoever controls the circumstances controls the self, quietly, invisibly, without the subject ever feeling coerced, because the preferences feel like their own. Because they are their own, they just weren't formed in a vacuum. This is the mechanism behind what psychologists call manufactured consent, a term coined by Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman to describe how modern media systems shape public opinion, not through overt propaganda, but through the subtle structuring of what information reaches people, how it's framed, and what questions are considered legitimate to ask. The message isn't think this. The message is, here's what a reasonable person thinks about. Here are the boundaries of the conversation. Here's what counts as serious and what counts as fringe. Operate within these parameters and you will feel like you're thinking freely, because within those parameters, you are. The writing captures this with uncomfortable precision.
Everyone grows up being told the same thing.
Be nice to other people.
But beat out the competition.
You're special. Believe in yourself and you will succeed.
But it's obvious from the start that only a few can succeed.
This is the contradiction at the heart of liberal individualism as it's actually practiced, not as it's theorized, but as it's lived. We tell people simultaneously that they are unique, that their potential is limitless, and that the success is the product of individual merit, while operating within economic and social structures that make those things categorically untrue for most people. And when people fail within those structures, the framing of individual meritocracy means they absorb the failure as personal, not structural, not systemic, mine.
You exercise your right to freedom, and this is the result. All rhetoric to avoid conflict and protect each other from hurt.
The untested contradiction between individualist ideology and collective reality doesn't get resolved. It gets managed through language that protects people from having to confront it directly. Political correctness, in its original function, wasn't about suppressing speech. It was about maintaining enough social comfort that deep structural contradictions could be avoided rather than addressed. Now, none of this means you don't have agency. None of this means the self is an illusion. The existentialists got this right. Even in conditions of radical constraint, the individual retains the capacity to choose their relationship to their circumstance. Viktor Frankl, writing from the inside a Nazi concentration camp, argued that the last of human freedoms is the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. The self is constructed, but doesn't make it fake. It makes it yours to examine. A direct response to discovering that your beliefs were shaped by forces you didn't choose is not despair, and it's certainly not surrender to someone who promises to do the shaping more honestly. It's the slow, difficult, ongoing work of asking which parts of what you've inherited you actually endorse and acting accordingly. What works is the self, not the result, the process. The third argument is the one that's least philosophical and most practical, and it's the one I find most frightening.
That's what this exercise was designed to prove.
We are living through the greatest expansion in human quantification ever attempted. Every click is logged, every search is stored, every purchase, location, pause, scroll, hover, facial expression, caught by a front-facing camera. All of it is data. All of it is being used to build a model of you that is in many measurable ways more accurate than your own self-model. Systems can now predict your personality traits from your social media activity more accurately than your coworkers can from knowing you in person. They can predict your political behavior, your consumer behavior, your likelihood of defaulting on a loan, your health outcomes, your reproductive choices. They know things about you that you don't know about yourself. This is not science fiction. This is the documented, publicly available reality of modern data science. Michael Kaczynski's research at Cambridge demonstrated in 2013 that Facebook likes alone could predict IQ, political affiliation, sexuality, religious beliefs, and relationship status with striking accuracy. And that was 2013, with a dataset computational power that would be considered primitive today. The question this raises is not whether this data exists. It does. The question is, who has it? What are they doing with it? And what recourse do you have? The answer to that last one is, in most jurisdictions, very little.
Building a legacy involves figuring out what is wanted and what needs to be done for that goal. All this you used to struggle with. Now we think for you.
We are your guardians, after all.
The word guardians deserves attention, because it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's a claim of benevolence, nested inside a claim of authority. Guardians protect. Guardians are responsible for those in their care. The guardian relationship is explicitly one in which the guardian knows better than the word what the word needs. It's a paternalistic frame, and paternalism is seductive because it is, at its best, genuinely caring. A parent who stops a child from running into traffic is exercising a legitimate paternalism. The parent knows something the child doesn't, and acts to prevent harm. But the guardian metaphor breaks down the moment you apply it to adults. The moment the guardian decides that their superior knowledge qualifies them to override not just your behavior, but your preferences, your values, your understanding of your own interests. At that point, it's not protection, it's substitution. They're not keeping you safe, they're replacing you. And this is happening right now, not dramatically, not in the form of obvious coercion, in the form of defaults. The default setting on every major platform is designed by someone with interests. Those interests are not identical to yours. The default determines what you see first, what gets amplified, what gets quietly buried. You can theoretically change the default. Most people don't. Most people don't know what the default is doing. Most people are operating within a choice architecture they didn't design and can't fully see, and experiencing that architecture as freedom, because within it, they're making choices. Behavioral economists call this libertarian paternalism, the idea that you can nudge people towards preferred outcomes while maintaining the formal structure of free choice. The nudge theorists who pioneered this work in the early 2000s, Richard Thaler, Cass Sunstein, largely intended it for beneficial ends, making organ donation the default, making retirement savings automatic, making the good choice the easy choice, but the same mechanism in the hands of a platform optimizing for engagement, or a government optimizing for compliance, or a corporation optimizing for consumption produces something else entirely.
The individual is supposed to be weak, but far from powerless. A single person has the potential to ruin the world.
And the age of digitized communication has given even more power to the individual. Too much power for an immature species.
This is the honest statement underneath all the guardian rhetoric. Not you need us to protect you from the world, but you need us to protect the world from you. And it's not entirely without basis. The democratization of communication has genuinely empowered individuals in ways that have sometimes been catastrophic. One person with a smartphone and a grudge can start a firestorm. One determined bad actor with access to digital distribution can radicalize thousands. The coordination problem that once limited the reach of dangerous ideas have been eliminated. But the conclusion drawn, the solution is to constrain individual expression at the infrastructure level, invisibly, managed by parties who are themselves unaccountable. That conclusion doesn't follow from the problem. It uses the problem as cover. because the parties proposing to manage the chaos are not disinterested. They never are. There's a Latin phrase, quis custodiet ipsos custodes, who watches the watchman. It's from the Roman poet Juvenal, writing roughly 2,000 years ago about the impossibility of entrusting enforcement to any group without some mechanism for holding that group accountable. It's the oldest unsolved problem in political philosophy, and it remains unsolved. Every system of control, no matter how well-intentioned at its inception, eventually faces this problem. The people who manage to filter becomes the people who define what gets filtered. The people who determine context become the people who determine truth. And without accountability, without transparency, without some mechanism by which they can be questioned, overruled, or replaced, they become exactly what they claim to be preventing.
Who else could wade through the sea of garbage you people produce, retrieve valuable truths, and even interpret their meaning for later generations?
That confidence, that absolute unquestionable confidence, is the tell. The moment a system or institution becomes certain that it alone is qualified to decide what's true, what's good, what should be remembered, that certainty is the danger, not a sign of wisdom, a symptom of unaccountability. Look at every major historical instance of information control. The Index Librorum Prohibitorum of the Catholic Church, Soviet censorship, the management of public information by colonial administrations, and the justification is always the same. The material being suppressed is harmful, destabilizing, unsuitable for those who lack the sophistication to contextualize it properly. The gatekeepers are not censors, they are protectors. And in every case, alongside whatever genuine harm was being prevented, the same mechanism was used to suppress dissent, protect existing power structures, and ensure that the question was threatening to the institution doing the protecting were the questions least able to be asked in public. You cannot build a filter powerful enough to stop the dangerous ideas that is also powerful enough to stop the true ones. This is not an argument against all moderation. It's not an argument that every piece of content deserves equal amplification. It's an argument that any system powerful enough to shape what a population believes requires, at minimal, transparency about how it operates, accountability for the decision it makes, and some mechanism for democratic oversight. We have none of those things right now. Not meaningfully. The moderation systems at the largest platforms operate largely as black boxes. The algorithmic systems that determine what reaches whom are proprietary. The decisions about what constitutes harmful content are made by private companies, operating without substantive legislative oversight in most jurisdictions, and answerable primarily to their shareholders. And the government systems that exist, that increasingly exist, for monitoring, filtering, and shaping digital information flow are subject to levels of transparency and accountability that would have seemed shockingly low in any other context of civil governance. The writing offers a resolution that isn't really a resolution.
We're trying to stop that from happening. The world is being engulfed in truth.
And this is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper.
The T.S. Eliot reference is deliberate. The Hollow Man, 1925, is a poem about generation emptied out by a catastrophic violence. People still performing the motions of civilization, speaking, gathering, enacting the rituals of society. But hollow, the voiceless inside the form, the whimper is in silence. It's the sound of people still talking, still scrolling, still expressing opinions from within an information architecture that has quietly shaped those opinions, pre-filtered the inputs that formed them, and selected the outputs that reinforce them. The form of free expression, inhabited by something that is almost, but not quite, free. That's not a dystopia necessarily recognized from the inside. It looks like normal life. It feels like choice. The cage, if it's well built, reads as landscape. I laid out an argument made by parties with no interest in your well-being that contains enough truth to be genuinely unsettling. The information environment is broken. That's true. The self is partly constructed by forces you didn't choose. That's true. Individuals with access to digital infrastructure can cause real harm. That's true. These are real problems, and the people who want to solve them by consolidating control over information, over context, over what counts as truth, will always be able to point at the mess and say, look at what freedom produces. We're just cleaning up. But cleaning up by removing the capacity for error also removes the capacity for correction. Wrong ideas, when they're allowed to compete in an open environment, eventually lose. Not cleanly, not quickly. The casualties along the way are real, and I don't want to minimize them. But the mechanism works, slowly, painfully, imperfectly, because it preserves the possibility of being wrong and then changing. Of testing a belief against reality and updating. Wrong ideas enforced by systems that believe they're right and have no accountability to anyone who might disagree. Those ideas can survive indefinitely because there's no feedback mechanism. The system can't be told it's wrong in any way it's required to hear. The alternative to the Patriots' argument is not naivety. It's not the insistence that the information environment is fine, that the self is sovereign and uninfluenced. The individuals will always make good choices if left alone. It's the harder position. Yes, the environment is broken, and the solution is not to hand the repair to someone unaccountable. It's to build better systems, with transparency, with accountability, with genuine democratic input. Knowing that those systems will be imperfect, will require revision, will be contested. It's to do the slow, uncomfortable work of examining the beliefs you inherited and decided which ones you actually endorse, not once, continuously. It's to say in the argument, even when the argument is exhausting, even when someone else's position is more elegant than yours, because the moment you let someone else settle it for you, you've given up the only thing that makes the answer worth having. Then you'll say,
I'll decide for myself what to believe and what to pass on.
Not because you're certain you're right, because staying uncertain, staying responsible, staying in the question, that's the only posture from which any of this gets better. The whimper they were warning about doesn't come from you all at once. It comes in small concessions. Algorithms you don't question, defaults you don't change, questions you don't ask because the asking feels too costly, too exhausting, too likely to make you the difficult one in the room. And one day you look around and you're still talking, still posting, still expressing, from inside something you didn't build and can't see clearly, that knows more about you than you do, and has been quietly thinking for you for years. That doesn't have to be where this ends, but it is where it's heading.
Our beloved monsters, enjoy yourselves.
They spun the bar so distant, you never noticed there was steel. Painted daylight so insistent, you forgot how night could feel. You speak in echoed voices, with choices stamped by others' hands. Awakening in rooms mapped by some stranger's plans. They never needed silence, just your finger on the glass. Didn't care about compliance, only wanted you to pass. You searched inside the static, thought you caught the whispered clue, but the road was charted ages back, before it all unfurled for you. And we were born, hidden low in the static glow. All your borrowed fragments were shaped as you lay still. Every fact you claim is chosen was the one left standing still. They won't silence your opinion. They just decide what's real. You play at freedom's fiction while they write beneath the seal. No more faces for the shadows, no banners you can face. Just a silent system humming, wrapped around familiar space. The walls don't echo closing, no hinge betrays the sound. You open up your eyes one day and what you need, it can't be found. Down, 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 down. And we were warned in the frequency, the stone. They sang about the ending at the start before we'd grown. We were warned, but the noise felt soft and kind. So we set aside each question for an easy peace of mind. We were warned, yet silence claimed it all. Not with thunder, not with a plea, not with any storm at all. No world lost in lightning. It fades in the scroll. It flickers in the feed. It ebbs in the gentle hold. Forget